This meeting is
There we go. We are recording. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Zoph. You are watching Simply SCAdian, No Title Required, a show that is about regular folks in the SCA, folks like you and me, people who have no peerages or baronial, are not barons or baronesses, either court or landed. And we found that the most interesting people in the SCA are just regular folks. And those are the people that we can learn the most from, in my opinion. And tonight's guest is no exception to the rule. Uh-oh, I'm going to screw it up because I didn't ask you how to say your name. Uh,
That's okay.
uh
Margarette
Margarette
la Gantiere.
la Gantiere. All right, Margarette la Gantiere is our guest. She is from the barony of Becale, which is Philadelphia in the modern world. When she located the SCA in June of 2022, she came for the costuming, but has stayed for the scribal. Well, the arts and sciences, but scribal in particular. She has studied illustration and design in college in the mid-late 70s, but struggled to find her place in the commercial art world, especially since she wasn't oriented towards advertising. She has a graduate degree in art education and is a previous U.S. swim youth swim coach. Say that 5 times fast.
Lots of words.
She has a love of making, having grown up in a craftsman family. She spent hours in both her father's wood shop and her mother's weaving studio. She also loves research as a former school librarian. Taking a deep dive into a topic or finding just the right reference makes her heart sing. And I'm getting pinged by people here on Facebook while we're talking. Let me close Facebook down. Hi, Margaret. All right.
Hi.
Okay. So, how did you find the SCA?
So it's a little bit of a long story. I actually knew about the SCA going back in the definitely mid to late 70s, because my parents, as craftspeople in New Jersey, knew people who were vendors and participants at Penzic. And so I had heard about this thing, and then kind of forgot about it. And it would pop up periodically on my radar. And I'd kind of go, that's kind of cool. I might like that. But it was really coming out of the pandemic that got me into the SCA. I had uh, gotten while in isolation, one of my deep dives was indulging my passion for historical costuming through both classes, but also through the very, very active YouTube community in the costuming world. And a number of people who it turned out were SCAdians were on my frequent flyer list. Um, Two of whom I've met in person at Penzic. Um, but I literally came off of a video one night and went, you know, I need to do that thing. And I went right to the website and, typed in the information and they said, this is your location and here's the address for a chatelaine. And I kind of went, if I don't do this, I'm never going to get out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hit the button and almost immediately got an email from our wonderful chatelaine. And she said, we have a social on this coming Tuesday. Do you want to come? And I went, yeah, sure. And she went, no, you don't need anything. Just come. It's very relaxed. You'll be fine. Um, and I made myself go. And I got there and I literally found my people.
Yay.
I came home and I messaged my daughters and I said, I have found my people. And they're like, yay, mom. Um, and I literally went on the next night onto back to the SCA website and went member. And it turned out the SCA already knew who I was. because in the process of doing all my research and historical costuming things, I had bought publications from the SCA. And so I typed in my email address and they went, "We know who you are." And I went, "Yeah, okay, I remember this." So yeah, it was kind of a fated to be situation. Um, I was I came in with a whole bunch of young people who were also new, we were all coming out of pandemic, going, we need to get out, we need to do these things, we need to, re-engage with people. And so I came on board with a whole bunch of new people in the in especially in Bicale, um, which was a lot of fun. Um, and I showed up at like my next social with a Renaissance gown that I was hand sewing. And they were like, "Oh boy." um, but yeah, I had been actually working on a mock-up for an idea for a dress. And I was like, I'm gonna need garb. I might as well work on
Nice.
it.
So, do you have any regrets that it took you so long to join?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I raised geeky children. We did, in fact, I taught costuming for cosplay with my eldest daughter for 5 years at comic book conventions. Um, but I think I was a single mom for most of their growing up, and I would have loved to I've raised them in the SCA. I have met SCA raised kids, and I love who they are, and I love how they are. And I've at Penzic have watched how the SCA kind of wraps itself entirely as a community around kids, and I would have loved that. Um, I have not wasted time. I am making up for lost time in doing the things, and everybody's like, "You don't have to do it all at once." And I went, "Yeah, I actually do."
Yes, you did. Yes, and you have. All right, so here's just some of your interests. Scribal arts, historical costuming, fiber arts, and archery are your four main interests in the SCA. But knowing you, so full disclosure here, we are friends and we camp together at Penzic. So I know how important the scribal arts are to you. And reading your bio, I see why.
uh,
Tell us about your journey in the scribal arts.
well, we can thank our MOAS for Bicale, because it must have been around December or January of 2022, 2023, shortly after I joined. She knew enough about me at that point. She said, "So there's this thing called the Known World Heralds and Scribes Symposium. And you might like that. And it's virtual, so you can just log on." And I went and I followed the link and I looked at it and I started going, "Oh, I want to do that. And I want to do that one. And I want to do that one. And I want to do that one. And I want to do that one." And I ended up basically doing the entire weekend with as many things as I could cram into it. And I went, "Yes, yes, I want to do that thing." And one of the things that kept popping up during the symposium was Sunday Night with the Scribes, which is a uh, Facebook-based group that meets every Sunday night I'm going to do Eastern time at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Uh, it is SCA based, but not SCA limited. Um, and there are basically now three moderators that host the class, do the technology, and schedule. All of them are SCAdians. Most of the participants, most of the time, are SCAdians. The first hour is just general chat and social and asking questions, showing off work that you're doing, getting advice, giving advice. And typically, the second hour, they bring someone in to teach.
Wow.
Um, and it got me off the ground. It's an incredibly supportive community. I had studied illustration and design in college, but had literally not done it in almost 30 years. And there were lots of people there who were like, you can do this. And so I jumped in and, I kept saying, I want to do Scribble, I want to do Scribble. And I kept volunteering myself, and nobody was giving me work.
And
Oh, hold on,
tonight's
hold on,
guest
hold
is
on.
no exception.
You okay? Yeah. Feedback?
Okay, go ahead. I was
That's okay.
pulling up the live video to comment your blog so people can look at your scribble art, but then the live audio, the video started playing.
That's
So
okay.
anyway, go ahead with your story, please.
Anyway, in fact, at the very, very bottom of my Scribble page on my website is the very first piece I did, which was a gift to our chatelaine, who Dana. And Dana was posting that year from Penzic about finding four-leaf clovers.
Yes.
And I think I caught the first or second day, and she went, I have four-leaf clovers. And I went, oh my God, four-leaf clovers. What an incredible number. And I went, I will design her initial, and I'll put four-leaf clovers in it. And then she kept finding more. And she kept finding more. And she kept finding more. And the design kept getting bigger and bigger as I figured out ways to stuff more four-leaf clovers in it. And that year, I think she ended the year unofficially at 22, which is what is in the scroll. And then one of the members of Bicale said, well, this needs words. I will write you words for this. And so my first unofficial piece as a SCAdian was to give her scroll with her 22 four-leaf clovers on it.
Nice. Yeah, she's pretty awesome about finding them.
I
I've never found one in my life,
No,
but
no,
Hannah
me
can
either.
find
I've
them
stood
everywhere.
next to her at Penzic and watched her go, here's a four-leaf clover, and go,
Yes.
yep, it's a gift.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I got lots of support from Sunday Night with the Scribes and got lots of initial learning under my belt. The other cool thing that they do is if you stick around long enough, they make you teach. And so I also have taught my first classes uh, for them on their sessions before I was brave enough to step out and present elsewhere in the SCA. So that was really cool. Um, but they kept encouraging me and they're like, you're doing really well, you're doing really well. And through connections there, I heard about Ann Tier's 48-hour Scribble Challenge. And they hold every year a to help clear their Scribble backlog, and it is a big, deep backlog. They hold a 48-hour challenge. And the Wednesday, it takes place over a weekend. And the Wednesday night before, you receive your assignment so that you have some time to research and, if needed or possible, reach out to the individual to see if they have any preferences or desires. My first person was not reachable. So I got to do whatever I wanted. um, but they hit the button on for us Friday night on the East Coast. It's the afternoon for them out on the West Coast. And it goes, and they have a online chat community. So if you have questions or concerns, or I literally made my first mistake on a scroll and went, oh my God. And everybody went, no, 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 you got this. You can fix it. It's going to be okay. Here are things you can do. Which I promptly paid back because somebody came in and went, I got to sign something that needs calligraphy and I don't know how to do calligraphy. And people were like, well, you can trace calligraphy. All you need to do is download a font that's period appropriate. And she's like, but I don't know how to do that. And I went, I do, I do. And so we got online with her and we coached her through how to upload the font to her computer and install it and got her off the ground so that she could finish her scroll. So it was that kind of great community experience, even though, yeah, 48 hours for a full scroll is a lot. Um, but I finished it. I finished it on time. I finished all my documentation and I tied for second place in my group. So they have classes. So they have novices, which I was because I had never done an official scroll, and then they have an intermediate and they have an advanced level based on how much experience you have. Um, this year, I entered as a non-competitor, partly because I had an obligation right around that weekend and I knew I wasn't going to be able to necessarily wasn't sure I was going to be able to commit enough to make the deadline. I turned out making it and I could still get feedback from the judges. So they use a rubric like A&S does for
Hmm.
the judging. Um, and so you're able, if you're a competitor or if you're a completed non-competitor, you can get feedback from the judges, which is really nice and useful.
All right.
Um,
So I have one question for you.
sure.
If anybody out there is interested in doing this Sunday night with the scribes, I'm looking at the notes that I've been jotting as we've
Yes.
been talking. How would they find that on Facebook?
Okay, give me half a second. Well, they can certainly the first thing they can do is go to Facebook, and if they search Sunday Night with the Scribes, they have a Facebook group.
Oh, okay.
Um, They also have a website, and I'm taking a quick look here. It is, there it is. Let me grab you a link and back to Zoom. I can throw that in the chat.
And then I'll throw that in the
Yeah, come on, where's
yeah.
the chat? There it is. I should know where this is. Um, okay. That is the link to their calendar page, which is the most useful page. It has the list schedule of all the meetings in every conceivable time zone.
Great. Okay, I put it in the chat, the
Okay,
comments for the video so people can
awesome.
find it. Thank you.
Yeah, so that got me off the ground. And after I won the Antier Challenge in my division, all of a sudden I got started getting messages from the East Kingdom um, scribe signets going, so would you like to make scrolls? And I have not looked back. Um, and I've been making, I love doing the Kingdom Scrolls. I also was asked by our Baron to be the baronial signet. Um, so I've been helping new scribes get started through being able to do baronial work and do my own fair share of it as well. Um, I really like because I had a bit of a struggle getting my foot in the door. I'm very committed to getting new scribes off the ground. Um, one of the things got put on hold a little bit because the British Museum or the British Library was down. They were hacked last October,
Hmm,
and they have just returned some of their digital collection this October. So it's taken them a year to get back up. But I have in the works a set of lessons for beginning scribes that I'm working on that will be in the form of 10 to 12 greeting cards that step through both technique and time periods, so that they can learn how to lay down flat color or how to draw a Celtic knot, um, with an associated manuscript. There will be links to the manuscript so they can not only work on the piece that I've selected, but they can explore the manuscript itself. And while we are not going to be addressing any calligraphy, information about what hand was used in that manuscript and where you can find information on it will be part of the class.
nice.
And so what the plan is that they'll work on standard cardstock. There's very good cardstock that's similar to the paper we use a lot in Scribble. And if they like them well enough, they then can hand those over to their local group as largesse. And so they not only get to learn, but they also get to have the opportunity, if they're happy with their work, to turn that over as part of service and part of largesse.
Nice.
Um, yep,
Okay, so the one thing that always astounds me about the scribes of the SCA is the financial outlay.
it is a lot. I seldom work in gold. Gold leaf is very expensive. To help our starting scribes, I established in Bickel what we call the gilded key. So similar to gold key, where you get garb from the chatelaine, the gilded key, we've built up a an assortment of supplies that I can hand out to beginning scribes. And even a couple of my scribes who are now a little established, who may not be able to run out and buy pergaminata, we, through some service that in teaching I did, we were paid by somebody in supplies, and they asked me what I wanted, and I asked for pergaminata, and I was able to buy enough that I can help supply some of our scribes with that material.
What
Um,
is that? What is pergamon?
so
I've heard it of it.
pergaminata,
Okay, go ahead.
so there are a couple of materials that are typically used for scrolls. One of which is Bristol paper, which is a very smooth, sturdy paper. It takes good quality Bristol, will take ink, both ink and paint reasonably well. Although I have unfortunately encountered Bristol that was not so friendly, took the paint okay, but the ink was a problem. um, Pergaminata is an artificial paper product that was created to replicate traditional vellum. And vellum is what manuscripts were made out of, that which is an animal skin that has been treated and worked so that it is very thin, almost paper thin, and nearly transparent. Um, and that's traditionally what manuscripts were made on. There are scrolls. I actually have some vellum that I've purchased for some very special scrolls.
Mhm.
Um, but that's very expensive. So Pergaminata is actually not a whole lot more expensive than Bristol, I found. I find it much more forgiving, and it's a very nice look and feel. Um, it is way more forgiving of a beginning scribe who makes mistakes because, like vellum, you can literally scrape the paint or ink off the surface of pergamonata the way a medieval scribe would scrape it off of vellum. And if you buff that down with either sandpaper or what we call pounce, then you can literally repaint or rework it just like it was the original surface. Um,
Wow.
so there are people who don't like it. You do have to kind of coax the surface a little bit at first, and you can do it with anything from an eraser to this material called pounce, which my pounce is a combination of chalk or calcium carbonate and an art material called gum sandarac, both of which were used in period to treat parchment, to help make the surface friendlier to both the ink and the paint. Um, you also have to be a little bit careful, like you do with actual parchment or vellum, in that if you get it too wet, it will want to buckle.
Okay.
And so it's in vellum, it wants to return to the original cow shape if you get it too wet. It starts to go, yeah. In Perg, it just sort of wants to go wavy. So part of learning to use that material is learning to control your paint and not be using it just like throwing watery paint on the surface. Learning your consistency.
Gotcha.
Um, but I find it's a great material. I no longer personally use anything but yes, it's really expensive. I am, having been an art person in college, I have done a lot of research on the paint. I actually had ground my own pigments in college. I'm actually working on a project that will be an egg temper project to be in the future. Um, uh, but I have done a lot of research into the pigments and the most common pigments used and which brand names of the paints that we use, which we typically use gouache, which is an opaque watercolor, and is the closest thing that we have to what would have been used in period on most scrolls. Um, and and which pigments go with which in which brands under what name, because the art world is not consistent about that. What one Winsor and Newton calls this color red is different from what M. Graham calls this, which is different from what Schmenke calls this. And so one of the things that I did out of personal curiosity is I've got, of the major brands, a comparison chart that says you want this pigment that is in period, you want yellow ochre. Well, these are the paints in those brands that match that.
Wow.
So the other thing that I did is, as you know, I'm a former school librarian. I actually have built a resource page for scribes for research. And actually, let me see if I can pull that up for you. Um, it is an Excel spreadsheet, and I've got probably in the range of 30 links of manuscripts and digital resources in there. I've got probably 20 blogs related to um, people who do scribal work. Um, and then I've got links to tools and materials in there as well. And I just build that. And then if somebody, every once in a while, somebody will say, oh, I came across this great link. And I will go, check it, verify that the link is accurate, verify that the material is legitimate. And if it is, I will put it into the spreadsheet. And I hand this out regularly to people.
Oh,
Because knowledge is power.
yes. Okay, so believe it or not, we're already 30 minutes into this.
Wow.
So I want to take a minute at least to focus on historical costuming because that's one of your other loves in
Yes.
the SCA. Tell me how you got into that.
Um, I actually, in undergraduate, before I went to art school, when I was in regular college, I ended up taking a theater class, and I ended up in the costume department, and I fell in love. I came very close to pursuing that as a career. Um, I unfortunately or fortunately grew up very close to New York City and had the opportunity to do some backstage tours at some companies and decided that in reality, what I wanted to do with costuming was design. And what was likely going to be my career path was sorting shoes.
Wow.
Or, maybe sewing some costumes, but design was not going to be one of those things that was going to be readily at my fingertips. So I opted to take another direction as far as my art career was concerned and pursued costuming as an amateur where I could have design abilities, and I designed for the schools where I taught. And then my daughters growing up were manga fans, and so I started making cosplay costumes for us so that they could wear them to go to their conventions. And invariably, I would get people asking questions, and that evolved into my teaching. Um, Eventually, with my older daughter, who also did some study of costuming in college, um, for about 5 years, we taught several classes on costuming for the cosplay community. But I always had an interest in historical costuming. I love history, um, and I had always wanted to dive into that more. And there was always a part that my favorite plays to costume were always the things where I could do historical research. Um, whether it was Our Town or the one show where what our director did A Midsummer Night's Dream set in a 1970s disco.
Wow. Okay.
Huck was fun. But yeah, I always liked to do the research, and I always liked to do the kind of look at the silhouettes, recreate the silhouettes, but it never really, it's theater. So you fudge it, you get the profiles right because the demands of a costume are very different. I did a beautiful dress for Our Town, which is Victorian, but it also went through four transitions in the period of the play, which is something that you is not part of what the actual historical silhouette costume would have been. So when COVID happened, I got linked into people who were doing historical costuming, some of whom had come out of the cosplay community. But I was like, oh, let me do this thing. And I did everything from, listening and following along to I actually enrolled in a series, Burnley and Trowbridge, who do a lot of 17th and 18th century work, normally because they're in the Williamsburg area, teach out of their store. But during COVID, did online classes. And so I was able to enroll in online classes and was making, a fitted 1700s gown in miniature because we couldn't be in person, so we did it on a miniature mannequin. And I made caps and I made aprons and I remembered I had done embroidery as a kid, remembered how much I loved hand sewing, and everything I was doing at that point became hand sewing. Um, so, yeah, I love the research. I've always loved the history, and it just kind of, like a lot of things in my life, migrated.
So, what time period do you focus on in the SCA as far as your clothing goes?
Well, what I've made to date, I made the Italian Ren dress, wore it to two events, and went, nope. Because while it was beautiful,
It's hot.
it is not me.
Oh,
It is too many dangly bits and frou-frou, and I am, you know me a little bit. I am not that person. I wanted to be trimmed down. So I had largely worked on sort of 12th century, the fitted kirtle. Um, I periodically look at Tudor and I kind of go, do I want to wear a ruff?
right,
I
right.
love them. I would make them for somebody else, but I don't want to wear it. Currently, I'm doing a deep dive. Since my persona is based in France, I am looking at Merovingian, which silhouette wise has a lot in common with some of the Viking Age things, but it comes from a different source. It is the post-Roman period in France that happens between the fall of Rome and the rise of the Carolingian Empire. And there's this brief 300 to 500 year period of the Frankish Empire or the Merovingian Empire. And it combines because the Frankish includes Germanic elements because France doesn't look the way it does today as it did then. So there's a lot of Germanic northern influence and remnants of some of the Roman and so it's a lot of shifts, but it's also a lot of layers. Colder climate, so you've got a caftan, we have underdresses. Um, Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of good document. We have some decent documentation. It's from grave finds. So, like the Viking, we're extrapolating based on fragments of garments. But we've got some pretty significant garments in some royal burials. So there's some pretty decent support there. Um, so it's been interesting. I currently have a lovely piece of wool that I just got sent over from Europe that is going to be my coat. One of the things that I'm excited about is they had tablet weaving and they had brocaded tablet weaving
Oh,
um, that we have remnants of in finds. And there's evidence that they used it a lot. So I'm going to get to do some of my tablet weaving to make trim. Um, I'm currently drafting hose because they have women's knee length hose examples. So I'm drafting myself a pattern for that. I do draft my own patterns largely. Um, this one is a fitted one, so I'm fitting to the body, which is sometimes challenging when you're trying to pin something to the back of your leg.
yes, I was gonna say that's always the hard part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I now have friends who do costuming. So, so some of the hard things, like I go, I need a hem. I need a hem turned and pinned for me. Can I come stand on a chair at your place and have you, instead of having to figure out how to do it on my own?
Right,
Um,
very good.
and then as part of that, I started making hats.
Right.
And the funny thing is, apparently, I've gotten known for this. This came into being because I started archery last fall, and although I am predominantly right-handed in most things that I do, I am bi-handed, and it turns out that I have a dominant left eye, which is why I was never able to to target anything my whole life. But thanks to some archers, they went, no, 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 we think you have a dominant left eye instead of a dominant right eye. And if you switch eyes, you should be able to shoot things. And lo and behold, they were right. Um, the disadvantage that I also had was that I have from swimming a bad right shoulder. So I simply learned right from the outset to be a left-handed archer.
Nice.
The problem is that most ranges are set up so that the sun is conveniently not in your eyes. Unfortunately, when you turn around and face the other direction to shoot, the
Sun.
sun sometimes is in your eyes. And I discovered an immediate need for a hat. And I, like went to the car and got a baseball hat and immediately discovered why medieval hats are built like this, at least for hunting. And that is because the string does not hit the brim of your hat.
Ah,
Yes, if you are standing like this, the string goes right by without hitting any part of the hat. But you have shade. So I very practically went, this is why this hat existed. I am going to make one. And thanks to my college work in costuming, I had done some millinery work. And immediately ordered felt blanks and made a hat. And people were like, wait, you made that? How did you make that? And I have had a demand. I've actually now taught my official first workshops in bicocket making, um, and was told by several people that I needed to teach it at Penzic. So
yes.
it is a plan that I will be teaching bicocket workshop at Penzic.
Awesome.
Um,
All right, still have more questions for you.
More questions? Ask.
So you are also seneschal of Bacale.
Yes.
How's that going? Especially because I was curious about the baronial transition, what the polling process is like for a senator.
Well, yes. So yes, I got to be seneschal, start being seneschal in interesting times because the East Kingdom is transitioning from doing their baronial pollings in via mail, which is the old established way, to doing the polling via email. Um, and it was a challenge. I think it's a great process. One of the conversations that I had with those that helped run it from the kingdom level is that they need to have more conversations about the populace, about the fact that this is a thing that is happening and this is what it looks like.
Mhm.
Because the largest challenge that I had was people just didn't know what to expect. And so when we went around and we said, hey, we need your email address, they kind of went, but I don't know why. And I literally had people that I was chasing down saying, I need your email address so you can vote. And they said, well, can I just mail it in? Like, nope, because that's not how it's going to happen this year. Um, once you've established the email list and you've verified it, the rest is easy. And the actual polling went extraordinarily well. Um, per those that be, of course, nobody got to know what the actual numbers were, but we had to make a minimum number of votes in order for it to be valid, and we far exceeded that number.
Oh, good.
So
Now,
they were very pleased.
how did that, how, I I mean, what kind of work was involved besides chasing down emails? What other work did you have to do as seneschal for that?
Um, so other than managing getting the emails and verifying them, which was challenging this time. There's not a lot that I had to do. I had to publicize it. I had to let people know in, I didn't have to. It was wise to let the populace know as soon as I was informed that the polling would be released. One of the things I did is I got on our mail lists and I got on the email list and I got on our Facebook group and said, your ballots are going to be in the mail this week and they must be back within a certain amount of time. And then I sent reminders and said, don't forget your deadline's coming up. Remember to vote. So pretty much I was a poll worker. The other thing, as in any circumstances when you have a baronial polling, is before, and I didn't get to do this part, although I was shadowing the seneschal at this point, is anytime you have a baronial polling, you want your candidates to meet the populace. And we did that via a series of web meetings and also a couple of live meetings, and held the live meetings in a couple of various locations so that we could um, bracket as much of the populace as possible. Um, I also just did a lot of reassurance. There were a lot of people who were very nervous about the process since we were one of the first to ever do it, and how was it working, and where were we in the process, and just communicating and going, it's fine, it's breathe, um, and just it was more people management than anything else. But it went really well. The kingdom, because it is really the kingdom that runs the vote.
Right.
So once we had the emails verified and they went, okay, we're going, there was very little for me to do. They did their thing in the background. They let me know in advance when they planned to release the polls. I let the populace know, and it ran itself from there.
Nice. Nice. Are
Yes.
you enjoying being seneschal? Is that a fun? I mean, I know it can't be like, woo, yeah, party on, but it still has its
It's
enjoyable
a lot of
moments, right?
work. It is a lot of work. I'm still adjusting to it. It was not a big aspiration for me to jump up and be seneschal. In fact, my New Year's resolution in January was that I was going to step back away from some commitments so that I could spend some more time on doing things like garb that I wanted to do. But we got into a situation where our seneschal had maxed their ability to be seneschal out and had repeatedly announced that they were stepping down and we needed candidates, and nobody was stepping up. And I knew that I was capable of it. And the thing that I think people didn't realize is if there's no seneschal, there's no barony. And there was no way that I was going to allow that to happen. And I went to the seneschal and I said, I would love to be deputy seneschal, but if nobody steps up to be seneschal, I will do this thing. Um, and one of the things that I'm emphasizing during my period of tenure is the training of deputies.
Good.
We have a lot of officer positions, and part of it is COVID. We we have new people. We have a lot of new blood. They want to be of service, but they don't know what these things look like.
Right. So being
And
deputy
so
is
they
nice.
don't want to
Yeah.
jump in and I'll be exchequer. What is that? um, so it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to step in when you're only a year or two in and you really don't know things. I'm old enough and experienced enough to go, I don't know what this means. Tell me. Um, uh, but I'm asking a lot of questions, but it's not fair to expect these new people to jump into things with 2 feet without any guidance. And
Mm,
so we have a lot of positions with no deputies, and we're going to really encourage strongly that those people who are experienced and have been the long-term Scadians pass this knowledge on, because then they can step back and enjoy.
right,
We've got to create pathways for the newer people to come in. Um, and I'm an I'm a new person, but I'm an old person.
right. Yeah, I hear you. No, I get it. Yeah,
Um, so, I see things a little bit from both eyes, that I go, yeah, I'm not stuck in the old ways because I don't know those old ways. Um, and there are things that we want, and it's like the SCA is evolving, and that's a good thing. And the future of that evolution is the incoming members and the younger members.
hmm,
They're the ones that are going to be there. But it's also really important for those who have been there before to share what they know, and perhaps let go of the burden of it has to be the way it was. So, because we've got to grow, things have changed, especially post pandemic.
right. All right, that takes us right into the final question of the show, which is what can the SCA do better?
Listen to their new and young people. Listen to the new and young people. They love the SCA. They came here for a reason. They joined for a reason. They love it for the same reason that the old people love it. Um, and they will embrace traditions where the traditions matter, but they will also bring fresh ideas with them and new ways of doing things with them. I have watched a lot of new young people just soaking up knowledge from people who are experienced SCA people.
Hmm.
But they also see new ways of doing things, and that's good too.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking with me tonight.
It was fun.
Yeah, and on a personal level, it's really great to see you again.
You too. You too.
All right, folks, you have been watching Simply Scadian, no title required. This is Zoph. Lucas and I will be back in 2 weeks. And not sure who our guest is going to be yet. If you're interested, please let us know. We have, you can either message us on Facebook at Simply Scadian, no title required. Find our Facebook page and send us a message to there, or we do have a Google form that you can nominate yourself or someone else to join us. So thank you, and I will see the rest of you in 2 weeks.